Imagine waking up in a place where nobody knows your face. No wallet, no passport, no phone, no photograph of you exists anywhere on earth. Someone stops you and asks the simplest question in the world: who are you? And you realize, yet you have no way to prove it. Not your name, not your birthplace, not even the fact that you're you and not someone pretending to be you. For almost all of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical, this was Tuesday. So here's the question that should unsettle you a little. If there was no ID card, no fingerprint scanner, no photo on file, how did anyone ever know who anyone actually was? And more importantly, how did they stop people from lying about it? Let's start with the obvious assumption. You probably think identity is a modern invention. A plastic card? A chip? A photo taken at the DMV under fluorescent lights. But identity itself is ancient. Older than writing, older than cities. The problem is, for most of that history, there was only one way to prove who you were. Someone had to already know your face. That's it. That was the entire system for tens of thousands of years. You were a hunter, a farmer, a trader, and your identity existed only in the memory of the people around you, your tribe, your village, your 50 closest neighbors. It worked because nobody ever needed to prove anything to a stranger, until they did. Because eventually humans started doing something dangerous. They started traveling, and the moment a person walks beyond the reach of everyone who remembers their face, something strange happens. They become a ghost, a blank slate. Anyone they meet has to take their word for everything. Think about what that actually means. If a stranger walks into a village and says, "I'm a merchant from the coast," nobody can check that. There's no database, no records office 3 villages away that anyone can call. The stranger's entire identity is just a story. A story you either believe or you don't. And here's the unsettling part. If a story is all it takes, then a story is all it takes to fake it too. This is where the real problem begins. Because if identity is just belief, then identity can be stolen, borrowed, invented entirely. And people did exactly that. Historical records are full of imposters who simply announced a new identity and walked into it like putting on a coat. Men who claimed to be returning soldiers, sons who vanished for a decade and reappeared, claiming inheritances. Entire fortunes changed hands because someone told a convincing story and nobody had a way to check. So humans had a problem with no obvious solution. How do you prove something invisible? The first answer wasn't a document, it was a person. If you traveled somewhere new, you didn't carry proof of yourself. You carried someone who could vouch for you, a companion, a guild member, a priest, someone whose own reputation was the guarantee. This is the first hidden truth about identity before ID cards. For most of history, your identity wasn't something you owned. It was something other people held for you. Which sounds almost beautiful until you realize the terrifying flip side. If nobody vouches for you, you don't exist. Not legally, not socially. You're invisible in the eyes of anyone who matters. And if someone credible vouches for a lie, that lie becomes real. So civilizations tried to fix this. They tried to make identity less about who remembers you and more about something you carry. The first attempts were shockingly physical. Ancient societies used seals, small carved stones pressed into wax or clay, leaving a unique imprint. If you had the seal, you were assumed to be the person, or at least the authority, behind it. Sounds clever, until you realize the obvious flaw. A seal isn't a face, it's an object, and objects can be stolen. Steal the seal and you steal the identity attached to it. Entire kingdoms recorded scandals of forged seals used to move armies, sign treaties, or drain treasuries. The seal was supposed to solve the trust problem. Instead, it just moved the vulnerability from a person's face to a piece of stone in their pocket. So, a new question emerged, one that would haunt every system humans built for the next several thousand years. How do you prove something is really you, and not just something that used to belong to you? The next attempt tried to solve that by combining objects with knowledge. Letters of introduction became common among travelers, merchants, and diplomats. A letter sealed by someone powerful, describing who the bearer was and why they should be trusted. This worked better, for a while, until people realized letters could be forged too. And worse, letters could be stolen from a dead traveler and used by whoever found the body. Every solution created a brand new crime. So governments tried something more aggressive: physical description. Early travel documents, centuries before photography existed, would describe a person in writing: height, eye color, shape of the nose. Distinguishing marks, scars. Imagine being handed a piece of paper that is supposed to prove you're you, and all it says is medium height, brown eyes, small scar above left eyebrow. Now imagine how many people on Earth match that description. This is where things get genuinely strange, because these early documents weren't really proving identity. They were only narrowing the odds. They worked less like proof and more like a filter. If the guard at the gate looked at you and thought, "Close enough," you passed. If not, you didn't. Which means for a huge stretch of history, identity verification wasn't a science. It was a judgment call made by an underpaid, possibly hungover gatekeeper glancing you up and down. Terrifying when you actually sit with that, and it gets worse before it gets better. Because the people most likely to travel across borders, cities, and trade routes were exactly the people most likely to want a different identity. Escaped debtors, fugitives, deserters, people running from arranged marriages or crimes, or simply from who they used to be. For them, this broken system wasn't a flaw. It was an opportunity. If nobody could truly verify your identity, you could become anyone. Entire lives were rebuilt on nothing but a new name and a convincing accent. Historians have documented cases of people assuming the identity of the deceased, sometimes for decades, fooling spouses, communities, even courts, simply because the tools to check didn't exist. So think about what this really means. Somewhere in history, someone was living your exact same face, your exact same voice, and successfully convincing an entire town they were a completely different human being. If that sounds impossible now, that's only because we forget how recent our current tools actually are. Because here's the twist. The thing that finally started cracking this problem wasn't better paperwork. It was math. In the 1800s, a growing obsession with categorizing the human body led to a strange new idea. What if the body itself contained a code that never changed and never repeated? Fingerprints had been noticed for centuries, used almost decoratively in some ancient cultures as signatures, but nobody had proven they were actually unique to each individual, and more importantly, nobody had built a system to search and compare them at scale. That changed when investigators began systematically recording fingerprints from criminals and comparing them across cases. What they found was staggering. No two people, out of the thousands examined, shared the same pattern. For the first time in human history, there was something you carried that couldn't be forged, stolen, or borrowed. Not a seal, not a letter, not a description that could apply to 1,000 strangers. Your own skin. This should have solved everything, except it created an entirely new problem nobody had considered. If your body itself is your identity, then your identity can be captured without your permission. Governments began fingerprinting citizens, then photographing them, then measuring skulls, eyes, and limb ratios in systems that today look deeply unsettling, because that's exactly what they were. The very tool built to protect identity from theft became a tool that could be used to control it. And this is the part almost nobody thinks about when they picture the invention of ID. The photograph, the fingerprint, the official document, these weren't just answers to "who are you?" They were also the birth of something new. The ability of a government for the first time in history to track a person's identity across their entire life. Before this, if you moved to a new town, you could genuinely start over. Your past didn't follow you because there was no system to make it follow you. After this, your past became permanent, attached to your face, your fingerprints, eventually a single card in your pocket. Which brings us to the real revelation hiding underneath this entire story. Identity was never really about you. It was about trust between strangers. Every system we've ever built, from a shared campfire where everyone recognized every face, to a global network of passports and biometric scanners, exists for one single reason. Humans need a way to trust people they've never met. For most of our history, we solved that with community. Then we tried objects, then paper, then description, then math, then biology itself. And every single step created the exact same trade-off. The more precisely we prove who someone is, the more control we hand over to whoever's doing the proving. So the next time you tap your ID against a scanner or flash your passport at a border, remember what that tiny card actually represents. It's not really about you. It's the final chapter in a 10,000-year experiment in trying to answer one impossibly simple, impossibly dangerous question. How do you prove you're really you to someone who has never met you before? For most of human history, your identity wasn't a fact. It was a story someone else agreed to believe. And maybe it still is. We've just gotten very good at making that story harder to fake and much easier to watch.